Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where we will now be talking about the ever-powerful Leinore. Now, Leinore is one of the commander cards, so she got her own story here. I will say that this one was really good because, I mean, you'll just see it. It's very, very twisty. So, basically, you have Leinore, who is actually just a normal person. If you look at her card, she's not a warlock, she is actually a noble. So she was basically picked from among the peasantry, the normal people, and elevated to a royalty status among the Harvesttide. So Leinore has a younger sister named Cinia, and the two of them, they're kind of just going through the forest because everyone's living there now. And there's a ton of people attending the Harvesttide festival. And so as they're going, Leinore kind of reflects on Catilda and the Dawnheart Coven in general. For instance, right here, we can actually see how she felt when they had been told about the Dawnheart Coven. It says, even though they wore, that's what the witches of the Dawnheart Coven promised her and the people of Kasig. Help us bring back the light. That was it. They had said this to the villagers, even though they wore skulls on their heads and mud on their faces and looked as menacing as the monsters hiding in the woods. The people agreed to help them. Bring back the light was whispered all around, and soon was more than a whisper and more of a prayer and a promise. So, people kept turning up missing every morning, and the days continued to get darker. And so Leinore is kind of like, I know I'm supposed to be like I'm supposed to be on the chair of cheer kind of thing. Like the Grinch. I'm supposed to be the one that people look to and like, oh, okay, this is just a normal person that is a leader amongst us that we can rely on. And so Lenore's investigating with Cinia by her side. And of course, everybody's got masks. Masks are kind of a big deal. Everyone has them, right?
I know.
And so at one point, they find a campsite. In the fireplace of the campsite, there's a dead snake, which is weird, right? Well, Leinore reaches to grab the snake to investigate it, and it comes to life and tries to bite her, and she's like, nope. And Cinia thinks that's hilarious. And she's like, because as soon as she let go of it, it stopped being alive again. It went back to being inert. She's like, that's really weird. And as they go to another campsite, they find a scale-crusted mask of deep gold with sticks fixed to the top of it like most of the witch headdresses. And instead of sun rays or moonbeams, there are snakes coiling out of the plaster. Under the eyes of the mask is two long wooden fangs. So basically it's a snake mask, right? With snake hair. And Cinia sees it and is like, oh, this is really cool. And Lenore's like, don't touch that, put that down. Because it just felt weird. Weirder than the other stuff the witches would do. And so Cinia takes off her current mask, which is the fox mask, takes that off, and she puts on the new one. And nothing happens. It just makes Leinore really, really uneasy. And she's like, please take off the mask. And Cindy's like, nah, I'm good. And then she ties the ribbons around her neck and around her curls. And there's a twirl. And she goes, I'm pretty sure they won't be coming back to ask for it. And Leinore hates the mask. It actually, the way this is structured, I would say for this one, you know, sometimes I'll say for a certain story, you should read this story. This is one of the ones where I would say you need to read the story because me recapping it doesn't quite have the same feel as it's being written because it feels like an Edgar Allan Poe story, which is funny with character Leinore. But you have her kind of talking about how she's like steadily getting more paranoid, and she keeps talking about how she does not like the mask and continuously is asking her to stop this, stop that kind of thing, right? And they start talking about how the witches were hermits and that they've been doing these natural cryptic rituals, and Leinore doesn't quite trust them. And we kind of keep getting this overall sense, and I'm just going to kind of skip through it. And as the days go by and they're waiting for the Moonsilver Key to get here, the people start to stop listening to the witches and start listening to Cinia, who refuses to take off the mask. And Cinia and Leinore, they live in the same tent. And what's weird is that sometimes it feels like Cinia's just watching her while they sleep. Like she doesn't actually sleep. And other times she feels like Cinia, like there's snakes around them. And there's not really a sense of, is Leinore losing her mind? Is there some dark magic at work that is causing Cinia to become more and more evil? Is it because the witches themselves are causing Cinia to become this? Or is there something affecting Leinore? It's not super clear, which I love. And then Leinore goes to talk to the witches, the head witches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as they're there, Leinore sees that they are chanting over a bowl and a bowl of teeth and wearing necklaces made of teeth. And these aren't animal teeth. These are like molars. And she's like, what is this? She said, and then Catilda tells her they are teeth, werewolf teeth. She said, these are not werewolf teeth. They don't look like werewolf teeth. And she's looking around for Cinia, thinking that Cinia might have disappeared. I mean, she could be some of those teeth. And Catilda says, well, they shift back into human form after death, but they have the essence of the wolf. And Lenore's like, And she just looks at her and she says, witch. There's a person behind her. A guy named Jagger. He's the one calling out to her, witch. She's like, uh-oh. And then he talks about the teeth and goes, did you steal those from the missing villagers? And Leinore basically hasn't wanted to say anything because obviously she doesn't want to like antagonize the witches. She has been given this honor and all this other stuff. Cinia has taken over control of this, but Leinore is terrified of these witches. And this guy, Jagger, is now like basically accusing them. And Catilda's like, what do you mean missing? And Catilda says, we're not enemies. Harvesttide cannot succeed with witches alone. We must do this together. And Jagger says, I don't trust someone who tells me nothing. You brought us here asking us to help you, but you keep us in the dark. And then another person says, don't trust the witches. Tell us where the missing are. And then basically it just keeps on going. Everybody just keeps building up on each other. And Leinore just stops and is like, wait, they didn't do anything. We don't have proof of that. And then Jagger's like, what's next? Are they going to feed us the flesh of the dead? And Lenore's like, look, we don't know what they're here for. They're helping us, and she still can't find Cinia. Her mind is kind of going all over the place. There's just this panic. Again, me telling you what's going on doesn't quite get across the level of pandemonium there is. And the people start getting more and more riled up. They're sacrificing people, and they're like, no, nobody's sacrificing anybody. And then Cinia shows up. She like brushes into the crowd. And everyone kind of turns to her. And they're enraptured. All the people just get real quiet. And Cinia says, you speak as if the woods have not been full of dangers ever since we were born. Anything you could have taken them. So many hungry things lurk in the dark. Vengeful spirits, vampires, ghouls, werewolves. And everybody's like, okay, yeah, that is true. Any of those things could have happened. If anything, their demise should humble us. We can't do anything while the darkness grows. Bring back the light. And everybody's like, bring back the light. And she's like, yeah. And everybody's like, yeah. And so everyone's happy now. And Leinore is shivering with fear. And so Cinia has the fur of a trapper, like a fur the trapper gave her, just gifted her. But she's still wearing the mask. And Cinia gives her Leinore the coat. And she's like, she just can't look at the mask. And she says, not the mask, Cinia. Every time Cinia looks at me. And Lenore's like, I thought you said we should leave. Because earlier in the story, Cinia had suggested leaving. But Cinia is now like, she's telling her, yeah, no, we need to stay. And this is what's crazy. Cinia took off her costume. Pieces of dried leaves fell to the ground, like a snake shedding its skin. But she left her mask on. She crouched on the floor a few inches from Lenore's face. Her breath smelled of dead things, ashes and rust. I don't want to leave anymore. The coiled one has spoken to me today, sister. Her voice came out deeper, raspier, like coming from somewhere else. Someone else. When she smiled, Lorna thought she saw a forked tongue peek out of the slit between her teeth. The light will return to Innistrad. And she says, you feel it too? The coiled one is surfacing. It's like, oh.
It's like, could you tell them to stop?
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, I'm going to skip ahead. It's more about how Cinia is basically corrupting the people of the Harvesttide Festival and taking over Lenore's role, and how Lenore's really, really worried. Right?
Uh-huh.
And so Cinia leaves the tent and goes out into the night. Leinore basically, like, she goes after her. She knows that something's up. She knows Cinia must be doing something, and she's pretty sure Catilda must be the one behind it, because Catilda's the head of the witches and all that, right? Well, she finds that there's a small camp made of 5 tents, and usually that's like the loners. The ones that don't really want to be a part of the Harvesttide but are there for the safety. They go out and they live on the outskirts of things, right? Or they don't trust everyone. Mm-hmm. And she sees her sister's mask in the dark. And it says that panic fought against any desire to help. She ducked behind a tent as 2 figures emerged in the distance. One of which, of course, was the sister. And then she follows the figures through the whole thing. And again, read it yourself. If you haven't stopped and read this, I'm not going to say it again, because this is crazy. Because she's following them, and she eventually realizes that Cinia is in danger, like in extreme danger, right? And then someone grabs Lenore's shoulder, and before she can scream, a mouth goes over her mouth, and a voice whispers, "Don't move, here she comes." And for a moment, Lenore's thinking she was talking about the second person that she had seen. But instead, it's Catilda behind her, pointing at Cinia. And Leinore could feel the heat on her face as the staff in Catilda's hand started to sizzle with killing energy. And so Leinore bit Catilda's hand, and Catilda's like, "Why'd you do that? I could have saved us." And then Sereth appears. She's like wrapped in a green snake, and she's like, "Ah, Catilda, is that you?" And Lenore's like, "Why did you shoot her?" And Catilda explains it's because Sereth isn't the one wearing the mask; it's her sister. So all of Sereth's power is specifically in the mask, and Cinia was consumed by it. There's no hope for Cinia anymore. She's been taken. And so basically Leinore reveals what's going on here. Ancient magics of Innistrad are derived from specific beings. You could think of them as being like nature spirits, right? And so the Coiled One is a very specific snake-like nature spirit that is the one that Sereth goes by, but not Catilda. And this difference in belief is why the two of these witches are against each other. And so Catilda starts basically fighting back against Sereth and is telling her, "Look, we have to kill Cinia, because if Cinia is consumed by the Coiled One as a sacrifice, the Coiled One will have all the power it needs to literally destroy the world." It can't be allowed to come up and do what it needs to, right? And Lenore's like, "No, I'm not going to let you kill my sister. We just need to get the mask off." And she goes, "She's already gone." She goes, "Let me try, just distract Sereth." And she says, "You have one chance." And so in the background, you have Sereth and Catilda, and they're fighting each other, flinging magic at each other, right? And then Leinore gets to Cinia, whose hand is ice cold and whose eyes are burning with a bright, terrible light, a glow that seemed to Leinore unbearably old. It's terrifying. But Cinia is able to whisper, "Help me." And so that's all that Leinore needed to not lose faith in her sister. The fact that she said, "Help me." And while all of this is happening, while Leinore is trying to get Cinia's mask off, while the two witches are dueling each other, a earthquake happens and a giant snake bursts from the earth.
Snap.
Yeah, exactly. And Leinore realizes that Cinna's mask has fused to her face. And that there's no way to get it off. And she remembers that Catilda says, "We must destroy her." And Cinna is still whispering. And she can hear, she leans in to listen. And Cinna says, "Rip it off." And so Leinore does what she's told, basically. And she reaches a hand to the mask and touches her sister's skin. Or what felt like it. And without thinking, she starts to just pull, and her nails sink into Cinna's cheek. And she can just, Cinna screaming this entire time. And she can feel it giving. And she's pulling as hard as she can. And she literally just pulls off the entire layer of skin the mask is fused to. Leaving it red and raw. Yeah.
It's Innistrad.
It is Innistrad. And so the snake is roars in pain and just starts to basically burrow back underneath. And it drags his body back into the depths of the earth. And I mean, it's insane. Leinore lets the mask go and lets it fall into the cavern. Since there's no one, no person for the snake to consume, the mask and the worm being down there don't really matter. Or snake, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And Sereth has been knocked into the chasm as well. They did it. They stopped it from happening. And it says here, soon they found people stumbling around, wondering among themselves how they got there, and which day the festival of it was. Members of the Dawnheart Coven were gently leading people back toward the Celestis. Nobody was spewing snakes, which was something that had started happening. People just started barfing snakes. Like I said, you need to read the story yourself if you want the full effect, because it's just such a crazy, it's such a good horror story. And there were none in the undergrowth either. Just leaves and frost under their feet. Nobody seemed to remember it. Not a soul asked about the guttural noises that shook the woods. Leinore knew that wasn't true, though. That it would have been like nothing happened. And from the look on Cinna's face, she knew her sister would remember what had happened tonight forever. Before the festival goers enveloped her completely, Leinore turned and looked back into the woods. And she felt it only faintly, the rustle in the trees, under the earth, as if a presence was passing her by. The Harvest-Tide Sovereign shivered and turned away. So, as Harvest-Tide Sovereign, she kind of got this front row seat to all these horrors. And yeah, that's this story.
That was amazing. And Wilhelm probably has an awesome character and fleshed out story too, right? Just like his commander deck?
No. Well, it is just like his commander deck, but no.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with some more legendary lore. This was awesome. It was such a good story.
It is. It's such a good story.
I'm glad the witches have stuff behind them too. I know we're going to see more of them in main story here, but I'm glad Leinore had this good side story. Don't miss it. Subscribe and like if you like the video.